wait till we get seated. We are filming today because we're going to release this on YouTube. So folks who aren't here, you know, our hybrid audience here at Playwrights Foundation. So thank you all for being here. It's so exciting to be able to get together and have some, you know, process conversations and learn more about how musicals are written. My name is Jessica Bird Bez. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm the Executive Artistic Director at Playwrights Foundation. And Playwrights Foundation is a new play development organization, and we exist to support and empower playwrights in their artistic career and growth, and champion their voices on a national level. And so it's just so exciting. We have a couple of alumni who are here with us and a couple folks who are not alumni, because we don't often, you know, support musicals, even though many of our writers are musical theater writers as well. So it'll just be exciting to get a little behind the scenes, you know, information today of what goes into writing a new musical. I also want to give a big shout out and thank you to Marin Theatre Company, who are hosting us today, providing some beverages and wine, and grateful for their collaboration. And I hope you can stick around to see Justice, a new musical, written by two of our panelists, Lauren and Kait. So I think they do still have a couple, you know, tickets. So once we are done here, feel free to go over to the box office and tell them you're with us, and they will take care of you. Also, before we begin, I just want to take a moment and respectfully acknowledge that Playwrights Foundation is located on the unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. And Marin Theatre Company, where we are currently, is on the ancestral, occupied, and unceded land of the Coast Miwok peoples. And so we encourage each of you to also get to know the native lands that you are on and native people, and take a moment maybe when you get home to kind of Google and learn more. But now, as we move forward, I'm going to introduce our panelists and folks we're going to learn a little bit more about today. So I'm going to start right here next to me. So next to me are the lovely Kilbanes, who are... We'll get a little applause for everybody. I'm getting used to being back in person. Online, there's no applause. Right, no applause. Just keep going. Just keep going. But the Kilbanes, they're a theatrical rock group from here in the Bay Area, a married songwriting duo. We have Kait Kerrigan and Dan Moses. But their theatrical works, they also are musical theater writers, include Waitlist, which you might have seen at ACT, and it's also been at public theaters. Under the Radar was also at Z-Space, correct?
Started at Z-Space.
Yes. Started at Z-Space, and also The Code, which was at ACT, As You Like It, at the San Francisco Shakespeare Festival, and Eddie the Marvelous, Who Will Save the World. Maybe tell us a little bit more about some of those. So those are some of a little bit more. Is there anything else that you all would like to share about you all as artists or people?
No, that doesn't. If people have questions, we would be happy to answer them.
We will have an opportunity at the end, like 10 or 15 minutes at the end, that we will have questions for if anybody has any questions. I'm also setting my nifty little timer so that like I know what's happening. Don't have to keep looking at my watch. And then next to the Kilbanes, we have Min Kahng. So Min is a Bay Area artist and also an alum of Playwrights Foundation's Resident Playwrights Initiative. Min is an award-winning playwright, composer, lyricist, and creative coach, whose works include The Four Immigrants, An American Musical Manga, and Where the Mountain Meets the Moon. And you might have seen some of those at Theater Works or maybe Bay Area Children's Theater, if you've seen any of those here in the Bay Area. But he's also currently has a new musical in rehearsal at La Jolla Playhouse for their pop tour. So continuing to make new things. Is there anything else you want to share, Min?
I think that's good.
Maybe I should just cut that question. We'll share more of that. You did a good job. All right, Kait. So Kait Kerrigan. Kait is woo. Okay. Yeah. Kait is an award-winning lyricist, book writer, and playwright from Maplewood, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. And she actually has had a couple, her play Father Daughter was cultivated in the Bay Area with a reading at Theater Works, and also had the world premiere at Aurora Theatre Company, so if anybody got to see that here. She has also received the Jonathan Larson Award for Lyric Writing, Most Promising Lyricist Award from the Theater Hall of Fame, and is the lyricist for Justice, a New Musical, which you will see, some of you may see today. But also the Time Traveler's Wife is going to be premiering on West End this year, that her and Lauren are co-writing. So Kait, I'm cutting this question. Is there anything else you want to share?
She's not done anything else.
No. Okay. And last but not least, we have fabulous Lauren Gunderson here. Lauren is a Playwrights Foundation alum and board member from San Francisco. And I also just want to give a shout out and thank you to her for helping organize this event today. So she's one of the reasons we're here as well. But Lauren is a playwright, screenwriter, and short story author, as well as a book writer of 5 musicals, including Justice, a New Musical that you'll see today, and the newly announced Time Traveler's Wife. And since 2015, Lauren has been one of the most produced playwrights in America since 2015. So we have a great panel today, powerhouse-like artists who all honestly come and approach musicals differently. So I'm so excited for us to have a conversation today and just learn more about, how musicals are written. So I kind of want to start out, because all of you are multi-hyphenate artists and have a lot of, multiple different artistic paths, but just want to ask what first sparked your interest in writing musicals, and then when was there a moment that maybe you claimed that you're a musical theater writer? So how is your path coming to write musicals? If there's a brave soul who wants to kick us
I'll
off.
start because mine is, I do not know how I'm here writing musicals because I never saw them as a kid, wasn't raised on them, the Mary Martin Peter Pan on VHS, absolutely, a few times. Had many questions about why the boy was played by a girl, but that's all right. But I did have one, the double cassette of Les Mis, the 10th anniversary concert edition, and I would play that over and over and over and over and over and over and over, one day more. I remember making my sister memorize it with me so we could sing it on the way to school. March around a monkey, whatever. And so I got really inside of a musical, and it was that one.
Yeah.
Through the concert version, which is even missing half the plot, and anyway, it's fine. But there was something about, even for me who was not raised on them, didn't have a lot of access to them. I saw Grease the movie, the ones you see, the Disney's, sure. And so, but I didn't realize that what I was seeing was both similar to the theater that I loved and the Shakespeare that I loved, and how it was so fabulously different. And I think that has been my education, is since my double cassette musical theater experience with Les Mis to now, where for the last basically 10 years, a lot of my work has switched from musicals. It was plays. Never would I ever write a musical, to maybe I'll write one for families. Oh, that was pretty fun. I'll do it again. You know what? Oh my God, I want to write them all the time.
Yeah.
And part of what the difference is the kind of collaboration you get. And I've worked with, all of us have worked together in several different ways. And perhaps we can also talk about the difference between plays with music, plays with a song or two, and how that works. Yeah. Because each of all of those questions get answered in this process differently but complementary, where we get to say what is the most emotionally valent way to make a point. And that's when you open yourself up to music, again, whether it's a full-on sung-through musical or a piece of music here and there, you get to answer, you have this incredibly powerful electric tool at your, in your hand to say well, if it's a breakup moment, we're gonna give them a song, And suddenly it's a totally different world. Doesn't mean that it in some places needed it, but so all that is to say, I learned it kind of in the trenches, how powerful and important and just unforgettable it can be if you work with great folks like this to make music.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks for sharing.
One day more.
To go down the line, I think I came at musicals actually in a kind of similar, an investigatory way. where I was writing plays in college, and that actually had kind of happened very quickly. I'd been writing, I wanted to write novels. And I loved the interiority of characters, and I was I thought I was going to go get a PhD in English literature and write books about books, and that's where I was, and then I sort of fell backwards into like directing something that was devised. I didn't have that word, but like I collaborated with a bunch of people and I made a thing, and it was so intoxicating to be in a room and make a thing together, and then the response from the audience was so thrilling. And then I called a friend of mine who was actually in theater school, and I was like, well, but how would I write a play? And he gave me some really good advice, and then I wrote a play, and I had this, I was 20, so I had that indefatigable energy of like, I found something I want to do, I have to do it now. And while that was happening, this kid I knew, Bree Loudermilk, was exiting Harvard by way of Berklee School of Music towards NYU to go become a composer, and reached out to me, and she said, do you want to write, I hear you're writing plays, do you want to write a musical? And I was like, okay, because I was just 20, and so we started writing. We came up with an idea like via email. There's an actual exchange of us like going back and forth, and the back and forth of it was me being like, wow, I don't know why a character would sing, even though I'd spent my entire childhood around musicals, and my dad is a community theater guy, he does a lot of musicals. I was in a musical when I was like 3. Like, I loved musicals, I performed in them. Yeah, my mom was in Carousel when I was 3, I turned 3, and I gave myself my own line. It was, which was a thing. It's like, it's followed the string of the story. But I didn't understand, like all of a sudden when like tasked with the idea of like, well now go make one. Like, why the hell are they singing? Like, that's so weird. If you're gonna do it yourself, like, why are they doing that? And like, you better have a good reason. And so that was the first musical that I wrote was like basically about all this music sort of coming at somebody, and that person being completely like anti-music, and like anti this basically emotion, and then eventually like cracking open and singing at the end. And that was, and it was my own, my own cracking open and figuring it out myself, and that led to one after another, and I kept writing plays, but I came to this through collaboration. I came to this through being in rooms with people and wanting to make things together, and so that drive of being able to like look somebody in the eye and be like, okay, let's make a thing, it's so exciting to me, and it's a genesis of the entire process for me. So that was my way in.
Thanks,
Going
Kait.
down
This
the
is
line.
our Don't break it now.
All right, my turn. I have kind of the opposite experience as Lauren, where when I became part of the Resident Playwrights Initiative, I was like, why am I here? Because as a musical theater writer, I like identify, I think, first as a musical theater writer and then as a playwright. But that was a fascinating, because I remember even applying and I was like, I write musicals, ha 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 ha. But there I was, and I was included in that group, which felt really great too. But yeah, for me, I mean, all the VHSs, Beauty and the Beast was like a pivotal moment for me as a kid, where like I just like spent time listening to it, just listening over and over and over again to Alan Menken, Howard Ashman, their music
Howard
and
was my
lyrics.
best friend in theater.
Oh my god!
You were a huge celebrity to all of us.
Oh,
That's right. That's right.
That's
He wrote me a song.
Oh my
Do you want to come up here?
We're gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about
It
that.
was pre-video. It was there's no
That's
record.
amazing. Well, I mean, his lyrics and his book writing, because he also wrote this stuff that were hugely influential
Indeed.
for me.
Yeah.
So I grew up, with all the Disneys, all the Sound of Music and the Annie and anything that was like that kids at that time had on VHS that was musical, I probably had. But I didn't do theater, so it was like this weird thing where I was like into animation and I was into like storytelling in general, but there's a whole other past that I don't need to get into now, where I didn't think theater was a path for me, and it was something I had to find after college. I was a music and rhetoric major, And so I didn't actively do theater in an academic setting, although even while I was at college, I still wrote plays and musicals. It was just in a different set. Right, but not for grades, not for school.
Which is probably better. The plays were probably better.
It's true, it's true. And then I was fortunate to get in with Bay Area Children's Theater, which is across the pond here. But they gave me my first commission, and they essentially had a really ridiculously tight schedule of turnaround, so I would have to write shows in a year or two. But I view that as like my grad school.
Oh,
like,
yes.
I was so fortunate because I can now say I had like 6 or 7 world premieres with them in the span of a decade, which not a lot of people can say that about their, what they're writing and what they're working on. So I feel really lucky to be connected. At the same time, I don't want to only do theater for young audiences, but I love it and I'll keep doing it. And you've written.
I love it too.
Yeah, I love it. I'm never not going to do it, but I would also love to expand my non-theater for young audiences work. And I think I'll just put this out there. My argument for musical theater is one, at least we're straight up showing you that we're in theater. Like when we sing, we're being honest that like, yeah, you're watching a performance. We're not trying to do realism. We're not trying to pretend.
It never was realism,
Right.
but why pretend it is?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So it's like, if you can't handle it, that's because you want something else, and that's fine. But that's just, musical theater people are really straight up in your face about, this is what we're doing. But I also argue that playwrights are very musical. So like, your work, Lauren, there's a cadence, there's rhythm
like
to
poetry.
it. Yeah, because it's real life. It's in real time.
And it's timed, yeah.
Yeah, and so there's
Exactly.
a musicality to it that even if you don't know the theory of music, as a playwright, and Jonathan Spector I think of, he has this very specific rhythm and cadence to what he's writing. Like you need a musicality to even be a playwright, that even if you don't have a song in your show. So I'll just put that.
Oh, that's so much.
Yeah. Totally.
We come as a unit, right?
Yeah, we're gonna come as a unit, and I'm gonna just like hand it right off to
I'm gonna throw it back at you at a time you are not anticipating, and it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say that just resonated so deeply, I think we've all talked about, is I do think one of the reasons we keep making musicals is because of that moment between when they stop talking and when they start singing, and the utter terror of that moment as writers, right? The impossibility of it every single time, right? Not just with each project, but like with each song in each project, and having to launch yourself off that particular cliff feels worthy.
Yeah.
Right? Of like coming back to that problem over and over again. So I'm just loving that particular, that vein of terror runs freely.
I love that description
Through all of
too,
us.
that like, there is something, and you have to rewrite that section of the show over and over
Every
and
time.
over again.
Yeah.
Like every
Yes.
time, you're just like, let's do the transition between like, where the words being words and the words being music.
Yes.
Like 50
Yeah.
times before we get it right.
That's
Yeah.
right, that's
Yeah.
right. It's like, how does that language
'Cause it's
cross
impossible.
two steps? Like,
It shouldn't
It's
happen.
absurd.
right, in
Yeah.
fact, it does not.
Yeah.
To Min's point, that like, this is theater, right? And so we have to pull from some other source.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we as creators, I did grow up as a theater kid and thought I was going to be an experimental theater director. I think because you get to make the play as the experimental theater director, there's a playwright, especially in college, obviously. But we don't need a writer, because everyone's 18. And then I got to New York and I sort of made a hard left, and I started writing songs in my bedroom and crying. And a lot of people had questions about that, including my parents had a lot of questions. But so I, switched from the guitar, to the acoustic guitar to the electric bass to impress a guy. And this guy, and he was right. And I decided I had a show booked at a club. So I would have told you in 25 I'm a recovering theater person. I used to do theater, but I'm past that now. Now I play in rock clubs because that's a great plan. And so I decided for a show I had booked like 6 weeks out, I was going to write an entirely new set of music and I was going to write it on the electric bass. But I was in like a stable, happy romantic relationship, so what the hell did I have to write about, right? I had nothing to say as a songwriter. So I decided to tell the story of Medea in my own brain. Because I have a lot of beef with Euripides. I really hate that play because we meet her when she is contemplating killing her children. So we have no chance to ever think of her as anything but a monster. And Jason's like, this has been great, I'm gonna go fuck a younger lady. And he leaves. And we're fine with it, right? So I decided to tell Medea's story from the very beginning. But I never intended to tell anyone that these songs were related or told a story. I just did it as a songwriting exercise because it was less scary than the blank page. Right? I just would wake up in the morning, well, I've got to write the song where she thinks he's cheating on her, but she's not sure. What does that sound like? So I wrote that material. And I would play them out of order as pop songs. And people would come up to me afterwards and say like, oh, it's like you know me. Very much hope not. So one night as a songwriter in New York, my piano player, my wrong piano player before, said to me, she said, didn't you tell me these songs tell a story or something? And I said, well, it's really nerdy. And she said, you should tell the story. And so in rehearsal, I put the songs in order and I just told her a little bit about what each song did, like sort of narrator style. And we get to the end of the rehearsal and she said, you do know this is what you have to do, right? And I was like, she was like, I will pay you $50 to do this Saturday night. And I was like, at the bar in Prospect Heights? And she said, yes. And I was broke, so I said, sure. So instead of like between song banter, which I wasn't great at anyway because you don't have your own lines, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I told the audience the story, and it was kind of this magical night where everybody got in the boat, right? And we sort of like rode the whole thing out. And it was funny because people thought they were coming into a bar, so they'd open the door really loud and the whole audience would go, shh. And so then, Dan and I got married, we put our band together, and this became the mode of songwriting, right? Of like, we're gonna do a song cycle and write a story, but we were still playing in bars. Like we were still, we were like a weird theatrical band that you could see in clubs. And then we got like a weird slot at the San Francisco Fringe Festival, and we thought like, let's try it. And some theater folks, Lisa Steinler and James from Z-Space, happened to see it, and they were like, we want to help you put this show Weightless on stage. So we sort of like slowly made this weird turn and ended up in musical theater that way. So we also don't know how we got here, but from a different road.
I love that. It's just so fun to hear how each of you came, to what you're doing. And there's so many different styles of musical theater, right? Like there's just so many different inroads and like how to tell the story. And also curious, to have you all share a little bit, like what does your creative process look like? Like when there's a spark of inspiration, like how do you go about writing? Like, what does that look like? I know it's different for everybody,
And for
What
me,
collaborators do you work with, Do you start by yourself,
Right? Yeah.
Like it's, is there a glass of wine involved? I don't know,
Just one.
But yeah, who feels like they want to share a little bit first?
Let's start this time.
I'll start.
Right, yeah, man.
It really is individual to each project, and I think one of the first things I scope out is like how much research is involved. Because like one of the project that I had produced at TheaterWorks back in 2017 was called The Four Immigrants, based on a series of comics that were drawn by a Japanese immigrant in the turn of the 20th century in San Francisco. And I didn't know anything about first generation Japanese, I didn't know anything about cartoon art, I didn't know anything about San Francisco history, so I had a list of all these things that I knew in order to do justice to the story, I needed to get to know. So sometimes it's just, you just know, before you can even start to conceive of any story points or character points, you just have to research. Other times I've been asked with my TYA stuff, it's to adapt a novel, and so you actually, I know I had a source material, but there wasn't really a arc in that that series of comics.
Oh yeah.
But it's not like, for example, adapting Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, which is a very clear story arc. You have something to pull from, and then it's a matter of deciding what stays and what doesn't, and that's kind of the first work, and then you might decide to like try to do character sketches and do a little music to figure out what this character sounds like, or world build with music, like what is the whole score going to sound like for this show. So I'll stop there.
Can I ask you a question? I wanted to say one more sentence about what you exactly just said. Is that okay? It's too late now. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks. Sorry, not sorry. When you say like what the world sounds like, how do you do that? What does that mean?
Okay. For Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, it was I can only answer by project because it changes. Because honestly, there are some projects where I'm like, this is just going to be a hodgepodge of musical styles, the end.
Sure.
And I'm like, whatever, if this is rock song, pop song, rock song, it doesn't matter, and it's fun, that's all that matters, right? But for Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, because it was so entrenched in like Chinese folklore, I had to kind of pull from, but it was like in a very linear storytelling fashion. I kind of viewed it as like trying to pull from Chinese tonality, pentatonic
Yeah.
scale,
Sure.
Yeah.
and yet still be able to overlay musical theater-ness on top of that,
Yeah.
which is hard because musical theater has a history of doing that and it being racist.
Yeah.
Right? So I
That's
had to make sure I came at it a different way than
Yeah.
the songs from the
Fashion
20th
manifesto.
century.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so it's there, and sometimes it'll just be sitting at the piano, and like, I think at one point for Where the Man Meets the Moon, I knew, because the show is so vast, and even the title has a vastness to it, so I like, the act of like putting my hands out was like, oh yes, and so there was something to that, and then the story starts in a really muddy, poor village, so that became clusters, so the opening number just became a bunch of clusters in my hands versus when the score expanded. That's an example, but it's
Yeah.
kind of like,
I
it's
love
like, it's the closest I can think of being to painting, where it's like you just kind of
Yeah.
use the tools you have to
Right.
to create a picture or sculpture.
Yes, gorgeous.
That was a
Rad.
great,
I
that was a
love
great
that.
follow-up
Yeah.
question.
Thank
And
you.
one thing I want to clarify too, that Min is the composer, the lyricist, the book writer, right?
Right.
Like all three of those
them.
pieces,
Yeah.
which often can be different people.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm very curious, Min, to just go a little bit deeper of like, is there some, like what comes first? Is it the music? Is it the words? Does it depend on the project? You know?
It does depend, and it depends on each song too. And I think, again, thinking of playwrights as musical people, to me, that's how it is. I'm just using, like, if a playwright uses, you know, literary history, all the things they learned from like English classes and what have you, poetry, music just has more tools. So to me, it doesn't necessarily start with one thing or another. It really kind of, I don't know how to say it, it just kind of like flows out, and then some moments, like my brain will be like, oh yeah, this song in Act 2, and I'm like, I guess I'm gonna try that and work on that. There's not like a clear path, although I do try to work linearly, narratively, just because then I can see how themes, whether philosophical themes or musical themes or whatever themes are developing through the course, and then once I get to the end, then I have to go back and fiddle around to make it work again.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Thanks for those follow-up questions. Yeah,
It's
I'm
kind of
curious who
interesting
else-
because like the way that, you know, because we're words people, and on that level there's something a little bit more analytical about the sort of like you and I are both so focused on like the structure of the whole story and like where are we in the story, and then when you talk about the things that you're talking about, it feels so connected to me to like the way that I am when I'm building song moments. It feels much more like I'm following some kind of thread somewhere. And when I'm working on a book, I'm very much thinking about the architecture of the thing that I'm building and whether or not it all has enough. It's whether or not it's going to collapse. And there's this building element to that. Whereas with once I'm inside it as an actual song moment, there's an artistry to it, and there's like sort of two parts of it, and that the building of once you have the architecture and it feels solid enough that you're not going to fall through the floor, then like the dialogue or whatever, like there could be art to the way that they talk, the way that the dialogue leads into the music and the music leads back to the dialogue and all of that, but like that initial impulse of mine is always about like, are they going to fall through the floor?
Sure.
Yeah, and how, you know, as a book writer, it's easy, well, and I've been asked, you know, doesn't the book writer just write the lines in between the songs? And I'm like, I see how you would think that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, a valid question. But the idea that what the book writer does, and all of us are book writers, I mean, we do other things as well, but the idea that what a book writer does is the same as what a playwright does. The idea of thinking that a playwright just writes the lines is absolutely mythical, because what we're doing is we're writing entire worlds, vast journeys, fully complex human beings that crash into each other. Why do they crash into each other? That's the book writer's job. Where are they going? Where do they want to go versus where they end up? Book writer's job. What song goes where? You know, and so my job as a book writer tends to start with, as Kait and I have, we've done all this many times in various forms of, you know, here's the story. And then assuming, because there are some kind of musical theater laws that you take with a grain of salt, they usually help, but sometimes they don't. And you can say, done with you now, but thank you for trying. But most of the time, you know, you're gonna have a big number at the opening. Where are we? What the heck is going on? Why are we here? Who is here? Sort of. Well, we'll get that. Second song tends to be like who are we focusing on? Like who's our way in? Who are we following in this journey? So they're gonna get a song there. But then it's like, okay, well, how many duets? How many solos? How many quiet solos? Power solos? Do we need big set piece numbers that everybody is in versus the trio that tells, so all of that stuff helps fill out. Well, we've had like 3 big numbers in a row. We got to get a solo up in here. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff aims you, even if you aren't looking to be aimed. It will tell you, like, girl, you can't have another duet. I swear to God, the actual one cannot handle another duet. And that kind of stuff. So you find other ways to use all the other tools in the theater to tell that, but like that's part of what I do. And then, but in many ways, I think Kait and I particularly work really well together because we are both book writers, and so we can kind of see the way through the woods as book writers do, which is you have to be a bit more macro. Where are you going?
Yeah.
So when I start any project, whether it's a musical or a play, it's always, I force myself to say, what's the ending?
Yes.
Whether that stays the ending by the time I've gotten to writing the last scene, we're not sure.
Right.
But going to a place, aiming at a thing, always helps me figure out who's in it, what do they want, what do they think they want, or for what do they need, all of the things to get. But if they're looking at something in the distance and you're aiming towards that, that's how you get a structure that's tight and an ambition that's clear and a drive and a want, because they know where they want to end up. Whether they get there or not, whether I let them get there or not. Different, but that focus really helps. And then you get to pull it apart and say, all right, I told you it's a love story. What's the love song? Like, what's the love song? And then I imagine that's a fun assignment to get. Because like, what kind? It could be so many kinds.
Yeah.
But the idea that I, as a book writer, will say, all right, this is the song where they both realize they love each other. See you in a week. It's such a joy to be in that position. I'm gonna go get a drink. See you.
I'm curious the person who like as a person who's often like I almost always work with other people. I write books, but I also write lyrics, and I try not to do both. I try to do one or the other on each project because I love collaborating so much. And I think that for me, that those early conversations where you all do the thing that you're talking about, but do it like, and you probably do it just among the two of you, like to that moment of like, can we tell each other the story of the thing we're making, and what things do we get excited about when we tell that story? What moments are obvious songs? Well, we know that there will be this thing in the second act that happens. That's why we're doing it. And knowing anytime you can know anything for sure, it makes it all less terrifying. And so then you can do that one thing. You can be like, okay, I'm confused over here and I'm confused over there. I do know what the ending is. I know like the last 3 minutes, but we're not gonna write that now. But then over here, there's this other moment that is crystal clear to me, and so therefore, that's gonna be one of the first songs I write because I'm okay. I feel like I've got this one, and so then you can like be like, okay, you work on all that structure stuff. I'm gonna go write this one song, and that's gonna tell us a lot about tone, and it's gonna tell us about like the depth of that character, and then we'll know them a little bit. Because without them having sung yet, you don't actually know them as musical theater characters yet, even if they're historical ones like we're dealing with.
Right.
Right.
I interrupted you.
No, go ahead. No, it's totally fine. Actually, tell us a little bit more about your all's creative process, and then I have some follow-up questions, like about justice and how you all work.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like for everyone, really project to project, right? Like we started as a kind of like narrative rock band, and now we're in a place where we are writing things for our band, but we're also writing shows that we don't ever intend to perform in, right? That are for other humans, and so that, and sometimes we write everything, book, lyrics, music, and we've also started collaborating with book writers, and so that's been like a new kind of wild part of our journey. I feel like we talk a lot. We before we start, the massive blessing of a collaborator first is you have like an editor that feels like they're in your brain, right? Which is amazing. But they're not in your brain, and they know shit you don't know. And that's great. But I also think the thing that's really challenging sometimes is when we were, writing before in our early lives, we would each go away, because I have to be alone in a room to start a song. I cannot start a song in a room even with this human, who is my human. And so we would go away and we would each sort of like, come up with a shred of something. Maybe it's a riff, maybe it's one sung line, maybe it's a refrain that feels clear, maybe it's just an image, right, that feels like part of the song or something. And or a verse, I don't know where this is going, you kind of trail off at the pre-chorus because you don't know what the hell's going to be. And we would come back together and we would sort of say like, you think it sounds like that? You know, and we have been writing towards the same moment in theory, right? And so that was, I think that was really, really interesting and fascinating. So we sort of have developed a language for the two of us where before we start a song, we of course know, you know, they're in the bar, he's just said, you know, whatever the setup is, right? Or whatever the sort of like emotional or action thing that has to happen. But then we also play the soundtrack game, where we're like,
Yes.
if this is a jukebox musical, and you know, what song would be this song already? But here's the thing, if you only have one song, that is deadly. Because you can't get it out of your head.
that's
right.
So you need 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want 3 songs that you're like, it kind of sounds like that, you know, the piano lick and that Adele thing, but not the bridge part. You know what I mean? Like you're finding the one thing that feels related, so that at least we can sort of like, we think we're on the same page about what a thing is going to be.
Yeah.
It's like a musical Pinterest board that you're making.
Yes, exactly.
Correct.
Yeah.
That what you said.
Exactly right.
That's
Yes.
right. That's correct. And then we go away.
It's incredibly helpful.
It's really
Yeah.
useful, actually. It helps you because
It's necessary.
right. Well, and I think there's this thing about, and again, collaboration, right? This is
Yes.
the joy of it. Like you think you know something because you can feel it in your breastbone, but then when you have to try to say it to another human being, you're like, maybe it was sort of like, can we tell each other the story of the thing we're
Yes.
making, right? You find out exactly what you know and what you don't know
Right.
Yeah.
right away. So anyway, so then we go away and we iterate, right? And I'm
Yeah.
a believer in like a lot of bad ideas is my, you know, so I'll come back and I'll be like, I have 6 terrible ideas, maybe play them for you. You know what I mean? And then we sort of work from there.
The thing you were just talking about made me think so much about, like when you were talking about sharing the thing that like, that then the other person's like, what is, you broke the
Really?
thing that was in my brain. Like,
Yeah.
there's something about that moment. I always think of that love song of Alfred Prufrock moment where he talks about, he's like, there's the person turning on the pillow and you say this like remarkable thing that you think is everything, and then they say, no, that is not what I meant. That is not what I meant at all. And it's like, it just like turns in your gut, and it's so hard. And I feel like I love collaborating, and kind of I love, it's also like that jump off the cliff that you were talking about too, that I just love. That it could go so wrong, but what if it doesn't?
Right.
Like, what if you have the wherewithal to talk to each other with such kindness and
Right.
and understanding and trust that like whatever they said, even if it sounds crazy to you, you listen to it and you're like, wow, that feels crazy. But there must be something in there that in what we said that must be right, and so that's assuming that the idea is over here, and that it's not my idea, and it's not your idea, but that like we're gonna find it in the center.
That's
It's the most
Right.
beautiful thing about collaborating.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes.
Well, and you know, I finally got to the point where I expect that, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like we know that's going to happen, and so it's like, let's get that out of the way
Yes.
as quickly as possible. Right? Let's get to that place of like,
Yeah.
oh, I see what you would, no, I don't see what you would, you know. Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, get there first, and then, you know.
Yeah, and
try
that's
to
not
fill
a
out.
fear-based thing. You're just
Right.
like, okay, we're gonna jump
Yeah.
into
Right.
very deep water.
Yeah,
That's right.
yep, yep, yep.
It's gonna be very cold.
Right, every time it's
And
cold.
It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's
It's like because the only thing you really have when you're making something, because it's all impossible and non-existent at the beginning, the only thing you have is the truth of the art, which gets truer the farther down the process you are. And so you have the truth of the art and you have the trust of the artist.
Yep.
And sometimes the truth comes first, and then you're like, do we trust it? And sometimes you're like, there is no truth to this, but I trust that we'll get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're following each other nicely, but that sense of, other than that, it's just all a gamble. But the idea that the people that you work with, and that's why, to Kate's point, collaboration, the folks that I know and trust now, it cuts down about 1/3 of the development time. Because we all speak the same language and know the questions to ask and know the pitfalls of like, oh, Lauren, don't do, you always do that. And you know, so you get there quicker, and then once you get there, that's when you get to do the fine tuning.
Yes.
That
Yeah.
takes it from like good to great.
Yes.
And then you have the thing, and
Right.
then it's unforgettable, and then it's timeless. So like, but it takes all of that trust to get there.
Yeah.
And you can tell the people that don't trust right away. You know, the kind of it gums up the gears, and
Yeah.
and there's a lot of I don't know, and it's the difference between leading with a yes versus leading with a no.
Yeah.
I think the people that don't trust the artist are like, well, I can't see how that will work. You're like, it was not our idea. Like the ones who are like, that sounds, it's Kate's version of like somebody going, that sounds great, tell me everything that's in your mind about that terrible, strange idea. And then on the other side of that, you're gonna get something really, really good. But you have to
Yeah.
lead with the like, I'm sure. Tell me more about that.
What?
Comfortable with not
how you all came together as writing partners and writing Justice, and kind of where that seed came from and journey.
Well, I heard about Lauren from Bree because Bree Loudermilk, who's the composer on this project, because they had gotten matched up to write a children's theater show, and I constantly use that phrase of like, that was my grad school, writing children's theater was my grad school, because children will not lie to you.
Ooh, they
They
will
will
not lie to you.
put their coats on and start to leave if you accidentally finish a story before you finish your story.
Yeah.
There's nothing like a room
Yes.
of 1,000 children putting their coats on and being like, oh,
Let's think
I
it's
broke
over.
it. It teaches you everything. But they did a children's theater, they did a children's show together, and I saw that show, and then I knew Lauren as playwright, and then the first thing that we did together was
Theater Works.
it was another children's show, and we basically knew that we had to write something really fast, and it was sciencey. And we needed, and I didn't want to write the book and lyrics, and the timing didn't make sense, and so we were like, can we bring in Lauren? She's really fast, she's gonna be great. And the two of us, I think, we got along, but like we didn't quite know what to do with each other yet. And then we did another project together, and that was when we like gelled. I feel like that's when we were living in the same hotel, and that's time spent together. I think that like we were like, oh, we're both moms. There were so many things about it that and also our brains are very structural, and so the way we talk about things really is compatible. And then this project came out of, we started doing The Time Traveler's Wife, but then this project came out of, Lauren got asked to write a one-woman show about Sandra Day O'Connor during the pandemic because people were asking people to do one-woman things.
Lots of small things.
And Lauren said, maybe, but I would like Ruth Bader Ginsburg to be in it, and I would like it to be a musical.
The poor commissioner was like, okay.
That was great
Different
credit.
than everything I asked you to do.
But then she called us up and she was like, hey, I want to write a musical about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor. And I was like, oh. But I have a life philosophy of never saying no to Lauren Gunderson when she asks me to do something, because it's always a good idea and it's always the thing I should be doing. So I said, yeah, okay. And I don't know how Ruth Bader Ginsburg specifically sings, like specifically her. Sandra Day O'Connor, I had hope, because nobody knows about her that much. And also she's like a Texan raised in Arizona. Like there's something about it that all sings. And she's got these complexities that are interesting and complicated, but like everybody knows everything about Ruth. Also, she is like the most diminutive woman in America, and like talks very quietly. And I was baffled by her as a musical theater character, but I'm so grateful that I had the life philosophy to say yes, because it was so much fun to figure out and to realize that, Elphaba is also a shrinking violet if she's not singing. Like you just start to think about it a little bit, and you're like, wait a second, she is pretty shy.
Are we writing Wicked?
And that is the pitch I came in with.
I was like, I don't hate it, honestly.
She was like, okay, yeah, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is Elphaba, and I was like, don't worry, it'll be okay.
So when you hear some of the songs tonight for Ruth, she has song number 2. It's called Let Me In, and it is our Defying Gravity.
Yes. It's not Defying Gravity.
It's not Defying Gravity.
It's
It's
the Wizard
the Wizard. Yeah.
But it's that moment of like you arrive somewhere, and I was like, well, how do you take this person who like doesn't? She talks very. I've seen her speak. I saw her speak about opera and law at the Chautauqua Institute in a huge amphitheater, and it was small.
Yeah.
It was a small, very detailed conversation about the times that law appears in opera, and at the same time, this is this woman who has launched such extraordinary reverence in the Supreme Court, in what the Supreme Court can be. Like, she's such a huge, massive, larger-than-life character. So you're like, all right, well, how do you reconcile those two things? And I think the answer is the Wizard and I.
There it is.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, to go back to that ultimate question, like, why are you writing a musical about this? You could write so many things about those women, individually and together. And then when we add Sonia Sotomayor, you see this sisterhood, this lineage of sisterhood, and this torch passing, which became what the show is about now. What greater bigger thing is there to sing about than American justice, than especially the pattern-breaking, glass-breaking iconography of these women, and the journey and activism of all of them, very unique kinds of journeys and activisms. And that to me is like all caps equal justice under law, which to me is like, that's worthy of song more than most musicals I see. So the sense of the task is huge and the cast is small, it's only 3, but that's why we wanted to kind of play with the impossibility of this, because frankly they were impossible.
Yeah.
There wasn't a women's bathroom in the Supreme Court, because why would there be? You know, like, I mean, like the impossibility of even designing a building that could even one day accommodate the diversity that they represented and spoke for. So the sense of like, it's all impossible. Well, let's just sing then. It's fine. So I think that's why, and I tend to want to write stuff that, well, my kind of chemistry that I'm looking for to, because it takes a while to write this thing. So is it worth your time? Basic.
Yes.
Is it worth your time?
Correct.
And at a certain point, what's worth my time comes to the question of what is theater for, both musical and unsung theater. And it comes back to me of what church is for. Because to me, theater is church. My dad is a pastor, so I can speak from experience. But the sense that what we're looking for when we come together, we are a congregation coming to learn how to be people, to learn how to have hope, to learn how to go on to be better, not just how to be better people, the best kind of people. And we learn that in a lot of ways, right? You learn it from great examples like RBG, like Sandra Day O'Connor, and you learn it from real crap examples like, you know, King Lear and Macbeth and all the other ones. So we come and we can learn in either ways, but we are absorbent, highly intelligent, highly social creatures, human beings. And so we've created this little medium where we all come together in a bunch and we watch the story and we absorb what we absorb, and then we go back and we're like, what did you get from it?
Right.
What did you get? Did we get the same thing? Great. Okay, then that may be a true thing then. Wonderful. We've learned one true thing today. So I come to the theater for that. And to me, human beings, the missing piece of that is that we are highly emotional. And so we learn not just through facts, we learn through feeling. And that's where theater, especially musicals, is like, I got you there. So putting all of that together is the reason to show up every day and do this work, because it's not just an entertainment, it's not just a fun afternoon or evening out. It is civilization building, it is social building, it is how we come to each other again and again to say, are we doing this right? Are we gonna make it? If I wanted to make it, what would I do? Then the theater says, well, here's several options for how you do it. So, and what I love so much about musical theater, that certainly we've done in this show, and all of us have done in our music, and I will just pause to say that every one of the work of these people on the panel, the first time I heard it, I was like, whatever you are is amazing. I remember hearing one, you sent like 2 songs from the Medea, and I was like, I don't know you, but we're gonna be real good friends. I remember I was like, meet me for a drink, who are you, what are you doing? And then hearing For Immigrants, I was like, what is this? Like the ambition and the heart, and of course when Bree, connected Kait and I was like, well, I've already know your songs, like we're gonna have it. So the sense of hearing people when they can do it well, it just changes everything, it breaks open, it's just like, I want that, I want whatever it is. So bringing all of that together is the reason to do not only this show, but all of the ones that we really care about. It comes down to that same thing of like, we're just trying to know each other and ourselves and how to be a little bit better than we were before we got here, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's great. We have about 10 minutes left. This has like gone by like lickety split. But I want to kind of transition this and talk about like the journey of a musical. It's like you're writing it, maybe you're done, maybe you have a draft, you want to hear it. Like,
should we get more drinks?
Yeah, right.
in 10 minutes, and then we'll want to leave time for a question or two. But yeah, I think just talking a little bit about demystifying what happens when you have a musical you've written. How does it move towards production? How long does it take? After you had, I know it's the funny thing where it's all a question for us, but I think also like, once it's been produced once, does that mean it's done?
These are silly questions. I was just gonna hit the ground running and start, because I do think one of the things, a story is great, so what we were talking about that we use as a writing exercise is also good when you have a show. What's the paragraph version? What's the three sentence version? When we say what's Justice about, it's a show about the first 3 women on the Supreme Court and a lineage of sisterhood that they created, passing the torch to each other, but really it's about hope in America. Great, I want to see that show.
Done.
All right.
Nicely
It's
said.
about a lot of other things than that, but that in and of itself is a little punchy, a little like ambitious, and you're like, great. And then have a song or two that you have written and have some recording of, that people who, I say recording because I can't read music in a way and really understand what it is, but if I hear it instantly, I'm like, get drinks. So as long as you have a couple of those things, and then of course the book and as many lyrics as you have, it's just helpful to prove that the thing is a thing. And that's when you can start having conversations about, is this a live band? Is it recorded? Does it actually need this many actors, or do we double it? You know, all of the practical questions of how does it get to the stage. But it starts with, what is it? Do I like it? Do I want more? And anything you can do practically to put that in one little document is very good. But that's also true after production, right? We're looking at where Justice goes next after this, and we're doing that right now actively. Of like, well, here's what we've learned from this show, and here's where we want it to go, and it fits in a couple, pages and with some links to the songs, and so you can really hear it. Sometimes you have commissions, oftentimes you don't, but the sense of presenting it in its fullest way. And then if that is if you don't feel like, well, I don't have recordings of the thing, we'll do a thing that helps you have a recording, i.e. do a reading, do some time in a studio, do something, get that composer, get these relationships, and figure out how you can have some proof that it's good, or proof of what the next step is. And then there's a lot of applying. Very practically, if you have a thing, apply to the Theater Works down south in Silicon Valley, apply to the O'Neill, there are several places to do developmental work of new musicals, and you gotta ask them, because they literally are some of the very few organizations on earth that are saying, please give me your unproduced new musicals, please, I'm right here.
Yeah.
So, take them at their word and send them, and every now and then you get luck aligns and you get to use their resources to develop it instead of your own.
Yeah.
But I think like on the simplest level, like it's sort of what you guys were doing. You were in a bar doing it, but like you were doing the thing that you do in new musical theater development, which is like you're just trying to kind of put one foot in front of the other. Like get a draft of something that has a beginning and middle and an end, and then you try to get your friends to read it. And then maybe one of your friends knows somebody, and they can get you an actual reading where like you're not in your own living room. And then from there, like in terms of those early stages before you know all the theaters and everything, you're just trying to go. I think the biggest, we even talked about the business of being writers, but the business of being a writer is that you have to be incredibly disciplined and self-starting and always be looking for what is the next opportunity and how do I get to it and how do I time manage for it and make sure that my draft is ready for that deadline and like make sure I have those demos. And there's a lot of, you have to be a pretty organized person, because it's lovely to have an agent, it's lovely to have people who are on your side, but like they aren't going to do any of that work for you. Like you still are you're the like a horrible artist as CEO, like you're running a business a little bit. And if you actually want to do this, you have to just keep pushing forward. And for me, I've hit this like magical moment in my career where like I have projects where I'm not the driver and like other people are driving the thing forward, and like sometimes I almost feel like I'm like, okay, well I'll catch up, I'll make sure that I'll get it done. But like this is the first, I would say I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I think this is the first time I've ever experienced that where I'm not the one who's just making sure it gets done and making sure that there's somebody who's gonna do that next step, and like, can I hustle over here, can I get to a relationship over there, can I network with that person over there and have drinks with this person, so that you're just trying to make sure that something happens next. But that's I don't know, that feels like the game of it.
Yeah, Ben, what can you?
We're going down the line again.
We're gonna go down the line.
I'll just highlight you mentioned relationships at the very end. Like, I cannot think of it. There's like maybe out of the opportunities that I've been given, maybe 10% have come because I applied and didn't know a thing, but 90% were because somebody knew me and talked to so-and-so.
Sure.
Somebody was at a theater company and recommended me for this, and word got around. And on the cynical side, you could be like, well, that sucks. Like, what if you don't know certain people? But on the other hand, it's like, but isn't that how life unfolds? Like,
That's right.
it's. I know the who you know sounds so corporate and businessy, but the who you know, you don't have to think of it that way. It's really, you want to find the people who resonate with your work.
Yeah, that's right.
And if people don't resonate with your work, it's. I'm an ex-Christian, but this Bible verse sticks in my head of like, shake the dust off your feet if the town doesn't want to hear the gospel, then shake your dust off your feet and leave that town.
Yes.
So it's a similar thing where it's like, you just have to know that like, you're not going to be for everybody, but the people you will be for, you can really make something magical together because they will be on board, and you get to grieve, you get to be sad if like, there are people who are not on board. I'm experiencing that myself. But you also can remember the people that are there for you and champion you. You have your cheerleaders, you have your supporters, you have your fans, you have your collaborators, the people who love you, regardless of how much success you have, right? So relationships are key.
And it also comes to like, you gotta make the thing so that someone can find you.
Yes.
All of
So when
that.
someone says, do you know Min? And you're like, I don't, how would I find your work? You have so much out there.
Have a
Like, listen
website.
to. Have a website.
The number of artists who I meet, they're like, I don't have a website. I'm like, you need somewhere where somebody can Google you and find you. If not YouTube, somewhere online. If just so somebody can like
Just
contact you.
practically.
Yeah, the one thing that makes me think of too, don't be afraid to ask.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I think that's something like I used to really, and still do half the time, work myself up about, like, just making me ask whatever it is. Will you read this for me? Can I sing this song for you? Do you know somebody who works at that theater? You know what I mean? Whatever the ask is, like, literally only good can come of that, right? The only thing you have to get past is yourself.
Yep.
So that's just a good thing to remember when you're trying to find those relationships, right? It's like, it's just, and I find at least like it's a muscle that does get stronger, right? It gets easier to make what feels like an outrageous ask, right? Which often isn't, right? That part's the mirror, right?
Yeah.
I would just add, I mean, yes to everything everyone
Yeah.
has said.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's all resonates totally. The one thing I would just add is just, you know, it does take time, and it does, like, these things are not immediate. And one thing that we found, just as a like way of framing this, is that it's really helpful to have multiple projects at multiple stages of
that's
development. It's like, because you'll work on something and then you'll get it to a certain state and then you'll wait. And then it'll be like 6 months, and it's so helpful to be like, all right, that's in this stage, now I'm gonna go to this. And if you've sort of reached this stage where like next thing's production and you're like waiting, it's like start something new. You know what I mean? Just keep the assembly line going, because it's otherwise you just go insane.
That's
Yeah,
another,
totally nuts.
I've met
Absolutely,
playwrights
yeah.
who are stuck on their first
Right.
thing, and I'm like, look for idea 2, 3, and 4,
Right.
and maybe idea 1 will find its legs later
Right.
once you've built up more with 2, 3, and 4. But like
Right.
when they get hung up on
Yeah.
idea number 1, it's like I don't, any words I say to you can't help you right now because
Right.
you're just so stuck
Yeah.
in this one project.
I was telling Lauren that I teach this book writing class occasionally, like a libretto writing class, and one of the first half of the course is about getting to the place where you like are pitching what you want to work on and what you want your treatment to be, and the first thing I make them do is I make them come up with like 5 to 7 ideas.
Yes.
Right.
And everybody's like, what? Like it's just like a paragraph of 5 to 7 ideas. It doesn't matter. Like they can be absurd, but like you have to have 5 to 7. And they're like, but I have 1, right? And you're like, and this is what I want to do. And I'm like, that's great. Have that one on the page. Also have
5, 6 hours,
and the remarkable thing is that like once they have to like pitch it to the room, and like sometimes like idea number 6 is like really exciting, and then all of a sudden they're like shocked that they want to do that. But that it again is that collaboration, not just like because the thing about collaboration that's so valuable in theater is that eventually the collaboration is with y'all, it's with anybody who's in the audience, and if you don't want to see it, I'm screwed. So like that initial like conversation that I'm having with one other person, you become my audience, and then we all become an audience, and then we all become, and like that bigger that tent gets, the more likely it is that there's going to be a group of people who want to sit in the audience with us and watch that maybe more than once, which would be so nice. Yeah.
I'm gonna open it up and maybe have time for one question and see if there's anybody in the room who has a question that's been brewing as we've been sitting
No
here.
pressure.
What if your collaborator really doesn't like what you did?
Oh.
How do you resolve that conflict?
that several times.
Yeah.
Sure.
You have to talk about it.
That's
You have to, I mean, I think you
Yeah.
lead with, I think you have to assume that the person did something, I think you have to assume the person did something right,
Yeah.
actually. Like, you brought them into this world, you want, I mean, assuming you're not gonna fire the person, assuming that the person is like going to be a part of this project. I mean, it could be like first thing, and then they're like, no, I put my foot down in the sand and this is where it is, and then maybe we don't keep going,
Yeah.
because that's not how musicals work.
Right.
But assuming it's not that kind of thing, assuming it's somebody that you trust and you have a relationship with, and you, or like that spidey sense that it's right, like, I think it's about assuming that something somewhere in there, either I communicated something in a weird way and you got a weird piece of information from me when we decided like what we were gonna do, or you did something where something in there is probably valuable and we just have to figure out what it is, like what's the germ of it that you, why did you do it? What do you, tell me more about it. Because I think that there's always, like, there's always something to be learned. Like whatever the draft is, whatever the bad thing is like there's always something that we can figure out from it. Like even if it's that like we just desperately didn't communicate well enough together,
Right.
and that's an okay thing to discover because that means we have to talk to each other in a different way.
Right.
I think tell me more works in the other direction too,
Yeah.
of like, if they don't like it, can you tell me why you don't
Yeah.
like it? Can you actually
Yeah.
lay out the reasons so we have something to talk about?
Yeah.
Rather than just, I don't like it.
Sure.
Like that's
Yes.
that's a dead end. There's
Yeah.
nowhere,
Exactly.
Yeah.
you're not gonna get anywhere.
That's
with
right.
that.
Well, and the idea of like, is the fix already there?
Yes.
Is it a tempo problem?
Right.
Is it a key problem? Is it like, is it fixed with things that isn't a scrap it and move on? You know,
Right.
because I think all of us have been in that project. In the last couple of days of rehearsal before someone
Yeah.
comes, there's like that moment. Has always, is it how it ends? Does it need, as what we call a button? Does it need a ba-dum-bum? Oh, where it's like, oh no, the button's, that's what it is. It doesn't need a
Yeah.
button. It needs a blackout where everyone's like, no clapping. You know what I mean? And so that affects all of it, right?
Yeah.
So and sometimes you don't actually need a new song, or you need a few new lyrics, not all new lyrics, or you need
Yeah.
a few, it's
Right.
just the bridge, you know. Because songs are so technical little music boxes of things, like you can take stuff out and it changes.
And I think also we've gotten a lot of mileage out of let's try it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Like there's that first moment of like, that's wrong, you know what I mean? But if you can like,
Yeah.
right? No,
Okay.
often I think I understand something before I have actually experienced it,
Yes.
and I'm wrong most of the time.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, let's try it. Put it in the scene. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Let's sing it through. Like, and then maybe if you couldn't say what was not working or what was the thing that surprised you in a way that didn't feel great, you can after you've actually experienced it.
Yeah.
It's like a play's called a play for a reason. Let's play. Let's play for a minute.
Let's try it. Like nothing bad happens to
So
try.
are
Yeah.
you guys still changing Justice, like after today, will
Yeah.
you change
We have a
things?
couple more things that go in on Tuesday. We have a pretty
Yeah.
short preview period, so we can only make a couple changes. We have like another
But we were
have
at that
another
phase
document
of
of
the-
like
Still
things that we're
changing
gonna do next.
Pretty small stuff and stuff that doesn't affect the actors, i.e. things that you're seeing, projections may come and go, they may
Lights.
change, become more, become less, lights, certain stuff in the sound, but at this point we switch from, let's just try a whole new beginning, which would mess up everything, which to, tiny stuff for the actors to accentuate and help what they're already doing, but pretty much leave the actors alone because there's this magical like marinating phase where they just need to do it a couple times without us being like, actually, if you could cut the end, move the end, and then they're thinking about it, and the plays become magic when they're not thinking.
Yeah.
Then they're like, whoo, I am on the river of this, and we're going downstream.
Yeah.
So we're kind of at that point, but
Yes.
there are tweaky things and stuff that are still, it's always happening until they go like, no, opening.
Yeah.
Is this the first preview?
Oh, no,
We've
this
had
is
two,
Thursday,
three.
Friday, Saturday.
This is
Today's
four.
Today's Sunday, so 4, yeah.
Yeah, that's the fourth
Yeah,
preview.
whole new song moments, endings of song. I mentioned the ending of a song because we just changed that last night.
And it will be
One.
changed, it
It'll
will
change
be
again.
slightly more on Tuesday, yeah.
So yes, it's all that's the love of musical theater and new theater. I will just say, as a thank you to Marin and for all of you for being here to support them. I mean, it's a big deal. It's a big deal to take a chance on a new musical.
Sure.
And they said yes before we had the draft that you're going to see now. It was the old draft, and we said, well, basically it's going to be very different. And they were still like, we'll do it.
Right.
And then I was like, thank you so much, because you do need somebody to say yes so that you can get to there. Right?
Yeah,
The bridge was
absolutely.
built with them saying, we believe in it enough to say, we trust you. Again, trust. The trust in the artist to say we're gonna build the landing so that you can build the bridge to get there, and then you have a place to land. So it's a big deal for places like Playwrights Foundation, places like Marin, who help the stories become story. You cannot do it without somebody saying, yes, please. I know it's not done yet. I know there's 17,000 things you don't know about it yet. I am right here. And so Playwrights Foundation in particular does that for so many writers across the world. And it really is a testament to the kind of the massive capital T trust that allows the future of theater to be born in.
That is a perfect place for us to wrap up. I feel like we could keep talking forever, but I just want to thank you all just so much for, you know, your generosity, and like I learned so much sitting here, and I've been in the business for a while. So and thank you all for showing up and, you know, supporting, and for your donations at the door. If you haven't, you know, given a donation, if you're able to, it definitely goes towards, you know, supporting artists like these in the process. And the box office is open, so if folks are still, you know, needing to get their tickets, the show starts in about 20 minutes. And thank you.